So I watched this one movie from 5 years ago now, and apparently the public loved it, and the critics didn't. One of those kind of movies, and yeah, uh, unfortunately, I would concur with the latter. It's not really very so yeah, it's called that is humor. It's full of stereotypes. This is the problem. Otherwise, I mean, it has some funny scenes, but not quite a lot of them. Like when he says, he tells his children, Merry Christmas and such, and that guy comes in and, wonders how long he's been asleep for. So that was kind of funny, I suppose, but, otherwise, it's just, I mean, it's the usual Will Ferrell, and yeah, it says in the trivia he was about to play Dusty instead of Wahlberg. I mean, I can't imagine him playing it unless it's a really sappy version of it. Because what he did act in was what he usually does, as far as I know. But somehow, I mean, yeah, it's really so. I have no idea how it made so much profit. Apparently, it made even more profit than Elf. No, Elf was slightly more imaginative, um, but this this wasn't really. I mean, this was just comedy based on supposed machismo and such, and it's not really, you know. I mean, sure enough, Wahlberg's character was slightly subtle. He wasn't all out aggressive and such, but it still wasn't very funny in the sense though. And and also at the end when they told him not to go out of the cones and yet to go around. I mean, yeah, that made no sense. It would have been better if it was kind of clear. I mean, he really couldn't have gone around without with a car in front. Anyway, just the matters ultimately in terms of the comedy itself. But yeah, in terms of the comedy, it's not really. I mean, it's it's weak, really. I mean, I've seen better, and yeah, I mean, and then to end it just like the beginning. I mean, but it's not very funny either. I mean, it's obviously it parallels it, but it's not it's just you know um the scene with the fertility doctor is weak as well. I mean, it's just relying on this thing, and as the goof says there, it's quite a goof there, but whatever. And it's just not really incredibly, like everything Farrell does, it usually ends up with him hurting inevitably. It just happens so many times. Uh, it's not very funny because it happens well, something repeated isn't exactly something that remains funny, even if it might have been funny in the end. And you know, buying a supposed castle with some royalty money is a bit unbelievable as well. But never mind, I'm not exactly going to, believability isn't quite the point of most comedies. I admit, but no. Um, it's still, I mean, one of those things that, and yeah, the thing with the dog as well was such non-comedy, if one can say. Just what the hell was it supposed to be about? I mean, did they like did they deliberately dishevel the dog into making people think that he's really old, and then suddenly finding out that he's not? That's really supposed to be comedy. I mean, that's just whatever, right? And the name, what? This is such awfulness. I mean, what's the point of that? I mean, there are some comedies that have some serious drama, that doesn't really fit in, drama that's supposed to elicit pathos, despite it being a comedy overall, etc. But this wasn't even that. This was somehow a name being used frivolously for a dog for children, and children that cheer every time they and say the name of it. It's absurd, honestly. I mean, okay, it wasn't exactly the big part of the movie, but it's still absurd, and and then Ferrell ends up buying a pony. Really, of course, pony is never actually seen ever again. But beyond that one few seconds beyond the yeah. It's a single scene, I guess, but it's only a few seconds. Literally. It's I mean, as I said, I mean, comedy has nothing to do with believability, but it's still, just another thing though that happened, but not in, this wasn't at all what anyone intended, of course, when they actually made the movie, or knew at all about the future, obviously, at all, as usual, unless somehow they're secretly. No, never mind. I'm not. Yeah, I'm just saying. I don't know. I haven't before seen Colby in a movie before. Now, of course, this was made 5 years ago. So it's not really quite relevant. He might have gone on to star or whatever in hundreds of other movies, but I don't think he has, and he won't. So yeah, it's a bit sad that. Yeah, Kobe had a cameo, and well, that's pretty much all he ever had. Although having a cameo in a movie called Daddy's Home is a bit strange, to say the least. Um, yeah, but it's quite sad how he ended up. Isn't it very sad with the helicopter and everything? Yeah. Um. So who was supposed to have been the funniest here? I thought it's really picking, the least bad out of them all, really. But yeah, Hannibal Buress is probably the funniest, possibly, Griff. But he only plays a side part. Farrell is kind of, you know, well, he always kind of plays some sort of the pathetic sort of part. And well, Wahlberg really seems to want to be in an action movie. He's not really very funny at all, even less funny than Ferrell in a way. I changed that issue, but yeah, there's a second as well. Great, yay! Of course, there's a second. It made nearly 200 million profit. Of course, there would be a second. I'm surprised there's no series and everything else. Yeah, yeah, I'll probably watch it, but it's it's not very inspiring. I mean, at this point, like even that Greek wedding thing movie, was even more, slightly more funny. Very much more funny, but slightly more and interesting as well at any rate. With all the different, with the cultural bits, as opposed to this, which didn't really have anything. So yeah, the only mediocrely, sort of semi funny thing that was in this movie was when he drove a motorbike up into his house and crashed them and everything. But not really, it's not really funny. I mean, and then he practically repeated that with the skateboard, as I said, every single time he ends up being injured. So it's just the same thing happening again and again. I'm surprised so many people want to watch this thing. It's so repetitive. I don't know how people just like repetition. It seems like they do. So I don't quite get though still what these popular comedy titles do. Like for some action movies, it's more obvious somehow, which make more box office. But this not quite very obvious. But yeah, this was stereotypes. Maybe this did have a lot of stereotypes, so possibly that. Yeah. Um, but it's otherwise. I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't very laugh out loud funny, wasn't really. And I watched um wow, the cheesiest movie ever. That, as usual, as expected, the audience mostly likes is the public, the general population, and critics do not. Now, I can sort of see both sides to this. I mean, it's incredibly cheesy, but somehow it tries to, it's very artificial. That's the problem. It really tries to create this you know the sequel is different, and it is much cheesier, but still slightly different. I mean, yeah, it does seem somewhat written better, as some reviewers have mentioned on IMDb. But I did laugh at certain points, especially when it comes to possibly, but there is still some parts. I mean, there are idiotic parts in both movies, really. So it's not like one has and one doesn't do such. But I don't know. Maybe, I mean, obviously the ending is incredibly cheesy, right? That's the thing. Like the ending in the first one was cheesy, but this really tops it. And I had no idea how idiotic that song was. I had never quite read the lyrics before, and yeah, they're quite stupid. Anyway, so yeah, it's otherwise. I mean, it's too not funny, but there are weak parts as well. Like when he tries to see how a shower is activated and such. I mean, that is, and it's extended so much. That is probably the weakest sort of comedy, if you can call it even comedy. Um, but otherwise, there are other parts that are funnier than that, certainly at that point. Um, yeah, how they wrote the female child actress's character though is was idiotic. I think. I mean, I don't know. She made her out to be some sort of um rabid bloodlust and just I don't know. Just what was that? And do Christmas movies seriously need to have a shooting scene? I mean, what I realize, it's probably Mel Gibson's suggestion. I mean, he's in so many shooting movies. Of course, he needs to be shot himself. But the rest there. I mean, I realized it wasn't explicit, because I even implied, though. It's just horrid, and a child doing it, really, a child of all things. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I realize, they try to reverse roles there with the siblings, which isn't, as I guess it could have been more stereotypical, but it's still. I mean, I've never seen any other Christmas movie that had a shooting scene in it, especially one with children. It's ridiculous, and just you know, even the fact she shot Gibson. I mean, wasn't funny per se. It just happened. So I mean, none of the reviewers has mentioned that this specifically was funny or anything, but it really took away a lot of any other comedy. I mean, there was some other comedy. Obviously, the ending also took away some of that, because it was mostly just cheesy, not comedic. It just wasn't, right? I mean, all right, John Cena, how I pronounce his surname, is was kind of funny, saying, "Oh, my favorite song, I play it anytime, even August." Other than that, though, there wasn't really much more comedy. The song itself isn't comedic at all. It's stupid, as mentioned, but I don't know. It's just it felt like they just needed to put it in just for the heck of it, because it's a Christmas movie, so let's put in some sort of Christmas song, and even though it makes no contextual sense, in terms of, even, it was written in the 80s for a certain event and such, nothing to do with this movie. The lyrics make no sense, essentially. Of course, none of this prevents the public who really, really splashed out in the cinema. This, of course, being before there was a pandemic and when people could actually go to the cinema. It's incredible. Like, no wonder they keep doing these. I mean, they obviously made a sequel because the first one also made box office, and the second one did as well a lot. Then again, I noticed that, like, even with Karate Kid, the first one made a lot as well, and the second one made even more. So, it's just expectations, and then whether people like the second one or not is kind of revealed when they release the third one. Usually, people go watch it based on how they felt on the second one, I assume. So we still do not know if they truly, truly enjoyed it. Um, well, based on the average, I guess, rating on IMDb, it's mediocre at best, but still not too bad, with 6 and such average. The reviews still are mostly positive somehow, as usual. Um, kind of like a problem child. That's a situation where it's not really very highly rated, but the reviews somehow, the ones that are liked, are mostly positive, which is bizarre. Because other, you'd think people would also rate it on average higher. Somehow they didn't. They rated reviews higher. Not sure how that works. I guess many people rate it lowly without reading reviews as well, I'm assuming. So anyway, yeah, this was, just, I mean, it's not like it wasn't. There were some things that were funny, but, they exaggerated as usual. And as usual, Ferrell always needs to hurt somehow. It's like I mean, he produced it himself, so it's not like anyone is telling him to be hurt. Somehow he just likes hurting for some reason. He thinks comedy lies in being hurt, apparently, and really, really doesn't. Really, mostly, you know. Of course, there needed to be another scene where, in the first one he's electrocuted, and the second one, then I've no idea what happened. Like, did the tree even come down on him? It didn't seem like it did. Somehow he still lost consciousness. I mean, I don't know how these movies make so much profit. Honestly, it's bizarre. Uh, It's it's quite repetitive. I mean, obviously the only difference is there are two new characters representing their dads, which, okay, well, yeah, you know, Gibson had some funny gestures and such, like in the car when they were talking to each other, and he was just raising his eyebrows and everything. But there are other bits which, weren't. I mean, it's still better than his action movies, though. Honestly, most of his action movies are so drab, really. That, just whatever, just keeps on, just violence throughout. At least with comedy, it's some better, isn't it? It's comedy, being comedy is better than violence, in my opinion. But there was violence in a comedic Christmas movie, which is absurd. I mean, yeah, sure, off camera, but there was, and somehow the one with bloodlust was a child. Huh? No, makes sense, huh? Um, yeah. Um. So yeah, it's, as I say, I did kind of like it slightly better than the original, but that's not saying much. The original was already pretty sort of bad, in terms of what happened. And they do tend to repeat a lot, and I have no idea why. They invited so-called Sully, the guy who rescued is probably just an advertisement for the movie, made that no likelihood, but somehow, yeah, he has a cameo. I have no idea really. So yeah, it's the weird small mundane movies that somehow made box office. Who knew? Huh? Yeah.